All right, you're ready whenever.
All right, sounds good. So, welcome everybody. Sean Marzoli here, president of Acceleran. Um, we've got a wonderful presentation for you today. I'd like to introduce Debbie Williams from QuickBooks, from Intuit. Deb, say hi.
Hello, hello.
So we've known Debbie for a while. Feels like a lot longer than it is, and that's in large because we have such a great alignment with what we do at Acceleran and what Intuit does, and most importantly, really what Debbie understands about software and the impact that it can have for a small to medium-sized business. It's really a wonderful partnership. So today's presentation is really about the power of tracking time, as you can see from the title of the slide. This is something that we've had a lot of experience with our small business customers, and how you can save money as well as have really happier employees because they're being paid, accurately. So without any further words, I'm going to toss it over to Deb.
All right. Well, gosh, I am so excited to be doing this presentation today. I honestly, I went a little old school. I don't know if you can see my picture, but I'm wearing one of my T-Sheets t-shirts. T-Sheets is a time tracking solution that I started working with in January of 2014. In January of 2018, we were acquired by Intuit, and then we're rebranded QuickBooks Time. I don't specifically work solely in the time space any longer. I have the absolute privilege of being able to manage some partner relationships, Acceleran being one of them. And my heart is still very much in the time space, and it's a subject I get extremely passionate about. Having come from that background of being able to, I went from healthcare prior to that into tech, and I landed in time tracking, never really knowing why time tracking was such a big deal. But I learned really quickly how amazing good time tracking can be for a business and the benefits that it brings to them. So I'm still extremely passionate about that. And so I might talk a bit fast today. I apologize. When I get excited, I talk fast. And I know we also have a limited amount of time. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in to the power of time tracking and why it's important. So first of all, a couple of benefits of time tracking, and I'm gonna talk across all sorts of different industries today. Whether it's, for example, we all know that time tracking is really important in the service industries or trades industries, right? Construction, HVAC, anything with hourly employees, right? Time tracking is important. We tend to forget that time tracking is also important if you do any kind of project-based work. So with this, project-based work could be, well, obviously attorneys need to track time to different legal matters that they're working on. You have um, uh, engineers that are often doing work on particular projects. Can be important to track time to that project, know how much time was spent on it. Also, architects. I've even been able to help a company. They were artists that did metal work. Um, who implemented T-sheets back in the day because they wanted to be able to track the time spent on each of those art projects, just so that they would know. So time tracking, really, really important. To know how much time you're spending if you've got to pay your workers hourly, but also to know how much time you're spending on a particular client or on a particular project. Now let's talk about, sorry, I got the agenda slide up. That's actually oftentimes a reminder to me because we are going to be talking about benefits. We're going to be talking about some common time tracking challenges, tools, and then have it open for Q&A at the end. All right. I already got ahead of myself, didn't I? So why track time? Already spoke to most of these things. Improved project management, knowing how much time you're spending on each of those projects. This is really important. If you need to bid a project that's of the same or similar scope and size down the road, how do you know if you're accurately making a bid on that? If you don't know how much time it takes you to do that project? Now, a lot of companies, they just guess at it. They're like, well, I think that project should take 120 hours, so we're going to go with that. But do you know? What if that project only took 100 hours? What if that project took 200 hours? If you think it's going to take 150 and it takes 200, but you did your bid based on 150, you've just undercut yourself. You've undervalued your own time. I've seen this be the case. With accountants and bookkeepers I've worked with as well, who do flat rate billing, if you will. They just charge a flat amount for what they provide their clients each month. But if they don't know how much time that client is actually taking, or how much time they're spending on that client, they don't know if they need to increase what they're charging the client or not. And I say that because I actually spoke with one of our QuickBooks Pro advisors back in my T-Sheets days that, she started tracking her time using T-Sheets and had never done it before, but was wanting to recommend it to clients. And so she figured, well, I better track my own time to see what this thing is all about. She found that a client of hers that she thought was only taking a couple hours of her time a week was actually quite the time suck when she factored in all of the work that she was doing for that client, and found out that that client was actually quite needy and she needed to increase what she was charging the client because the value of her time was not being recognized. And that all came down to tracking the time and knowing how much she was spending. You can also, have increased productivity and better resource allocation. You might wonder, well, what does time tracking have to do with that? Well, when it comes to productivity, if we don't know what people are spending their time on, how do we know if they're being productive, right? A task that you think, you expect, your employee to spend maybe 5 or 10 hours on a week. If they're taking 20 or 25 hours on that task, then you can address that. Why is this taking longer? Do you need better training? Do you need to be more efficient? Do I need to take somebody who maybe um, has more time available, readily available? Maybe they're not tracking as much, and move them over to help out this person who is spending way more time than we thought on particular tasks or projects or customers. So when you are tracking your time, when you do know where that time is being spent, you can move employees around better. And you can also see where you've got, your people that are really strong in a particular task, your people that are weak in that, and maybe have those ones that do those tasks faster, more efficiently, help the ones that are a bit slower. I also I have on here to remind myself examples of how time tracking can impact the bottom line. There are a lot of ways. We know, according to the American Payroll Association, actually, we know that when a company goes from either not tracking time at all or goes from tracking time on paper to an electronic method, they save an average of 4% a year on payroll cost. And that is because they're actually getting accurate numbers for payroll for their hourly workers. So if you have 5 employees, for example, that are making $30,000 a year, and you save 4%, you can save $6,000 a year, roughly, in your payroll costs just by that payroll being more accurate. And that's a huge savings. It more than pays for the cost of the time tracking solution, if you go with an electronic method. Also want to throw in a personal story here. I had been working at T-Sheets for about a year and a half, 2 years. Started working with a new QuickBooks Pro advisor who, began recommending T-Sheets to their customers. Again, T-Sheets is now QuickBooks Time. Because it was acquired in 2018 by Intuit, and then it was rebranded. But I had this new bookkeeper that recommended a customer for then T-Sheets, now QuickBooks Time. And she called me up one day and she said, "Oh my goodness, I just ran my first payroll. One of the employees of the company called up and they said that I shorted her on her paycheck. I panicked." Because I thought, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to happen. This is supposed to be really accurate. What's going on? Well, we looked back through the audit logs of that employee's timesheets because QuickBooks Time has audit logs, tracks everything on every timesheet, and you cannot edit the audit logs. They are set in stone. And we looked, and there was only one of her timesheets for that pay period that had been edited. And it was actually to give her an hour and a half more of time. And the note on it said that she forgot to clock back in after lunch. So, what she got paid for was what she actually tracked. So, what we figured was when that company was doing paper time tracking, and this is common. This was the case for me before I started working in tech and tracking my time electronically. I did paper time tracking. It was always my best guess as to what hours I had worked. I couldn't tell you what hours I worked on Friday versus, and especially not what I worked 2 weeks ago. So, I think I probably worked more than 40 hours a week because I'm pretty good about not shorting time, but I don't know for sure because if you're not tracking it in the moment, how do you know? How can you remember what you worked? So this woman who thought that she was shorted on her paycheck by a few hours wasn't. I think what had probably been happening when she was tracking time on paper was, leaving a few minutes early, taking a little bit of a long lunch here and there, padding her timesheet, not intentionally. Time theft is usually not intentional, I don't think. I like to think that it's not by employees intentional. But when they moved to an electronic time tracking method where she was just clocking in and clocking out, found that she wasn't actually working her full 40 hours a week. So that's where a lot of that time or that payroll savings comes in with your hourly workers. And then, of course, we have that added benefit of knowing if you're doing project-based work, how much time you're spending on any given project. We also know that you can increase billable hours by more than 10% when you start tracking time to projects, and those projects are billable by the hour. You can end up capturing more billable hours. And one really cool thing about QuickBooks Time is that you can ensure that employees pick the right option, yes or no, for whether or not it's billable by just limiting the choices on the timesheets. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Deb, do you think I could interject for a moment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off that story, right? Because couple sort of subjects. Whether the whether it's intentional or not, right, on employees, not doesn't really matter. The point is when it's accurate and it's equitable, that's better for both the employee and the company. And especially like let's say the company has a incentive profit sharing or stock option plan, or it contributes to the 401k. That profitability is what drives that number, right? So if one employee is a little out of sync on their manually tracked or paper tracked time, that's one thing. But what if it's 20? What if it's even just 10? What if it's 100? And we see that a lot, and we see the impact of tracking time electronically amongst our companies. We've got a small painting company here local to me that uses the time tracker, and they told me recently that they think their accuracy has increased by as much as 15%.
Oh, wow.
And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. So what does that mean to you as a company and your profitability? And they said, well, obviously it makes us more profitable, but it also makes us be able to bid the jobs more accurately, which is a point you just made. And it allows us to put money back into the company and into the profit sharing plan for the employees. So exactly like we think. these are real world examples that customers are going through, and I just wanted to piggyback off that a little bit because I think you make those points, and there's so many examples of it that I think it's almost like everybody should try to track time, regardless of the industry, because I think you'll learn lots of things about your business.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well,
Last, go
oh,
ahead.
go
Sorry.
ahead. Mhm.
Well, last point I wanted to ask: do you have any data on? Do you think it's employees are happier when they're paid more accurately? My gut
Yes.
tells me that they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And with something like, again, my examples are mainly coming from T-sheets or QuickBooks Time, because that's, that's been my history with Intuit prior to the last few years. And but I believe it's true, across the board. Um, when employees know that their time is being tracked, electronically, whether that's on a mobile app or on the computer or on a kiosk or whatever it is, there's peace of mind that comes with that. That, hey, there's a record. It's not just my boss having to trust me that I showed up on time. It's not my word against my coworkers' word if they think coming in late all the time, or whatever. But knowing that there is that electronic record, with QuickBooks Time, there's the audit logs, like I said earlier, so if an edit was made,
Yeah.
by somebody to a timesheet. But yeah, there's peace of mind knowing that I can't be, you know, my paycheck is going to be accurate because my time tracking is accurate, and I don't have to rely on somebody reading my chicken scratches. We did, and I say chicken scratches, my chicken scratches, because when I was tracking my time on paper, I could never find a pencil, so I would track it. I'd like do pen, and sometimes I would have to like scratch it out. My timesheets were a mess, and I feel sorry for the poor soul that had to read them.
And it's also like employees feeling that it's fair amongst all the other employees,
Mhm.
right? It's not just their accuracy, but they know that no one else is sort of fudging the figures either.
Absolutely.
Well, I didn't mean to take
Absolutely.
you off track there, but I just wanted to interject just a tiny bit.
Oh, absolutely. No, no, great examples. Great examples. And those real world examples of small businesses that use time tracking, I think, are so powerful, because a lot of times for small businesses, they look at the fact that, if they go to an electronic time tracking method, it often comes at a cost, right? It's a subscription.
Yep.
And they think, oh my goodness, I've got to pay for this. Paper and pencils are free, or cheap, not free, but cheap.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you have those real world examples of small businesses that are actually able to grow, to put more money back into the business because they pay this small subscription fee for electronic time tracking and all the benefits that come with that, I think that that's really powerful, and it's one of those things where like the small expense yields a much greater benefit. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Well, let's talk about some of the challenges to time tracking. So, of course, in this world of most people don't go into an office anymore. Well, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of us are working from home these days. How do you track time for remote workers or workers that go out to job sites? Or, for example, there was a winery years ago that I worked with to put all of their workers on what is now QuickBooks Time. How do you track time for those remote workers? Well, when you're doing it on paper, what you end up with is people writing their time down on paper, taking a picture with their cell phone and emailing or texting it to you, right? And then the payroll person has to go through, decipher all of that manually, add it all up, the regular, the overtime, pay time off hours, all that sort of thing, and then manually, enter it into your payroll system. Okay. But oftentimes it is challenging getting those paper time cards, having to reach out to employees. Hey, I don't have your time card. Deadline was 2 hours ago. If you want to get paid, I need that. And they're like, oh, I'm in the truck driving to a job site. I can't get it to you right now. Right. There's a lot of headache and stress involved in that. So when you have remote workers, there are some added challenges there, for the worker tracking their time, but also for that, the payroll person who needs to then get those hours in order to pay the employees. When you have multiple projects, again, looking at, construction companies, or like landscaping companies, architecture firms, right? They're juggling multiple projects. And how do you track efficiently when you do have multiple projects going on at the same time, and be able to get the data that you need, the reporting that you need from all those different projects? And then, of course, employee resistance. Employees that haven't had to track their time in the past, or tracked it on paper, sort of the honor system. Sometimes there's a bit of resistance there as well. They're like, hey, why do you want to track my time? Don't you trust me? Well, yes, we trust our employees, And yet, there still needs to be accuracy there for all those reasons we've already mentioned. So, how do you overcome these things? Uh, well, for remote workers, make it easy for them. For employees in general, make it easy for them. Give them multiple options. Whether it be a cell phone. I mean, how many of us live with our cell phone sitting on our desk, right? Most of us, I think, do. Cell phone goes everywhere with us. And if your time tracking solution has a mobile app, great. We're so accustomed to doing everything on our phones anyway, from checking email to sending messages to, looking at our bank feed, whatever the case may be. Mobile apps are an incredibly user-friendly way to um, uh, to capture hours, no matter where that employee is. Um, Options like tracking time on a computer, excuse me, or potentially a kiosk. If the person is not a remote worker and there's lots of people that need to use like the same device to clock in, kiosk is a great way to go for that. Um, but make it easy on the employees. Make it a standard. Um, you know, just tell the employees we're implementing this, and these are the reasons why we're implementing it, because we want to make sure that we're paying you accurately. This is for your own good that we're implementing it. It's going to be used across the board, or we need to capture hours, accurately for all of our projects so we can make sure that we're billing our customers appropriately, right? That's another good reason to track time. But make it a standard and give the employees those reasons and just say, hey, this is what we're doing, period, end of story. I've been amazed over the years at how many times I've talked with office managers or business owners that say, well, my employees don't want to use it. And I'm thinking, well, who's the boss? And if your employees are that resistant to it, I would wonder why. I mean, my employer has a right to know what I'm doing during the working hours that they expect me to be working, right? I mean, they have a right to know that I'm here at my desk working versus, out having a 3 hour lunch with my friend or going golfing, right? So I've always wondered like why it is that um, employers are so afraid to upset their employees who are resistant to having their time tracked. I honestly I don't understand that. I've tried over the years and I just don't get it, because my feeling is if my employer is paying me to do a job, then they have a right to know that I'm doing the job, especially when I was an hourly worker, and my hours were pretty set. Like they have a right to know, but make it a standard. Reassure those employees there's something in it for them. There is that reassurance that they are going to be, paid accurately, or that the company is going to, take the benefits of this and roll it into perhaps additional benefits or hiring more people or whatever the case may be, growing that business because of the time savings or dollar savings from the time savings. And again, make sure that things are user friendly. Flexibility and user friendliness is so key to overcoming resistance. Um, and then lastly, let's go ahead and talk about some tools. And so options, of course, there's manual time tracking. Well, the options are no time tracking at all, which is rarely a good idea. Manual time tracking, so that would be like an Excel spreadsheet or paper and pen. Electronic or automated, some sort of electronic time tracking solution, and there are a lot of them out there. There's a lot of choices. Now, how do you best decide, or how do you decide what's best for your company? And this is where I'm going to start talking about some features. And again, my background is with what was T-Sheets, um, and so I'm going to speak to a lot of our fan favorite features within T-Sheets, but know that there are a lot of different time tracking solutions out there. You just have to find the one that has the features, the benefits that are right for your business. Okay. Um, so, look at things like entry methods. Are the employees largely at a computer and they can just, clock in and out on a computer? Cool. Use the computer. Um, QuickBooks Time has a computer option. It has a kiosk. A kiosk is great for restaurant or retail spaces where you have some sort of a tablet, whether that's an iPad or a Samsung device or whatever. It doesn't matter. It works on both um, iOS and Android systems. But the employees can all go up to the same kiosk. They find their name on the list. They punch in their PIN number, and then they can clock in, choose a project. If you're tracking time to projects, don't have to. In my early T-Sheets days, I was hourly. I didn't have to track time to projects, but I did have to clock in and out every day. Super easy. And it was nice because I always knew how many hours I was at for the week. If I was heading into overtime, or I, maybe took an extra 15 minutes on a lunch one day and needed to make that time up. It was actually really nice to be able to see that in the moment. And then also the mobile app, the T-Sheets mobile app, or QuickBooks Time mobile app, sorry, is so incredibly convenient to use. I tracked my time for years on that as well. Do you have employees that work away from the office, right? Like I work from home, and with something like QuickBooks Time, there's GPS tracking and geofencing. So I'll talk about those for just a moment. This is incredibly important if you have workers that go from job site to job site throughout the day. So I'm thinking of like landscapers or construction workers. With the QuickBooks Time mobile app, you're able to see where they clocked in because it tracks the GPS location of the app itself. Now, the employee does have to acknowledge when they first sign in that they know that their location is being tracked. You cannot see what they're doing when they're off the clock, and that's you can reassure employees of that. You don't get to see where they're at midnight on a Saturday if they're off the clock. That's not the employer's business. But only when they're on the clock can you see their location. And it'll track their location throughout the day while they're on the clock. So you can see if, like, let's say I'm running late to work one day, and I, want to stop and get coffee. And I clock in because I don't want it to look like I'm late. And I clock in at the coffee shop 2 miles away from work. Well, if I'm on the mobile app, my location is being tracked. My supervisor can actually go see where I was when I clocked in and see that, oh, I clocked in at the coffee shop, not at work. That can be addressed with me. Um, and just ensuring that people are where they need to be throughout the day. Geofencing kind of takes GPS tracking and kicks it up a notch. With geofencing, you're able to set a parameter around an address for a job or a customer. Because QuickBooks Time is deeply integrated with QuickBooks Online, but it also integrates with QuickBooks Desktop. You can import your customers, sub-customers, projects, whatever you have, into QuickBooks Time, and you can set an address and parameters around that. So when the employee arrives at that job site, the app will say, hey, you've just arrived at a site with a job. Do you want to clock into this job? And the employee can say yes or no. It doesn't automatically clock them in because if that employee showed up to work a half an hour early, you don't want the app to start, tracking their time, and therefore you paying them for that extra 30 minutes that they weren't working. But it does for the convenience of the employee, let them know, hey, you're at this job site. Do you want to clock in now or not?
Deb,
Yeah,
just to interject there, because a lot
please.
of our customers are in the service world. This is also a great tool for billing. If
Mhm.
you're doing time and materials type billing for that customer, they can
Yes.
use the geofencing as a great way to demonstrate that the person was on site, and working and collecting those hours for billing. So just an add.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like painters, house painters, roofers, things like that. Yeah, it's
You
a
know what
great
else?
way to reassure the customer that the
It's
people were there.
it's a really interesting point about, you know, when you have this ability to pinpoint where when your people were on a job. Let's say, the owner of the business or the manager of that crew or supervisor, they're not always there, right? And let's say there's a conflict that arises with the customer, and the customer is debating or arguing whether or not the billing should take place because they're trying to argue, well, the people weren't even here, they weren't even on the job site. That's, I find, a lot of our customers tell us where this serves as this sort of secret benefit that they didn't even know that they were going to get, right? In addition to billing that properly for the time, they get to not have to debate that with the customer because it's just so very clear.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can print out the GPS map. So what's on my screen here is the mobile app in the green inset, but the larger map is what you can see from the web dashboard, if you will, view of QuickBooks Time, and you can see how many employees were at any particular job site, and if you needed to prove to your customer that the employees were there, you could either screenshot this uh, or you can drop some of the data down into a CSV as well if you need to, but I think the image of it is much more powerful and say, hey, look, no, we had 4 people at the job site, and by the way, these are the hours that they were there. So, to your point, Sean, yeah, this is powerful when it comes to, those perhaps little disagreements with customers. The customer might not think that all the employees were there, but this is a great way to say, actually, yes, indeed, they were, and the work is getting done.
And that data gives you the ability to de-escalate that situation because it's just factual.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's no longer opinion, but it is actual fact.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and those geofenced coordinates, those are something else that we can't just scrub from the system. And we can't make them up and add them. We can't scrub them out. So from an audit perspective, they're really secure, which is great. Project tracking is something else that I think is really cool, especially when you're doing project-based work. So you can get budgeted versus worked hours, which is really neat. So this is where for any particular project that you bring over from QuickBooks or create within QuickBooks Time, if you're not integrated with QuickBooks itself, you can set a budget of hours. So you can say, hey, for this project, I think it's going to take X number of hours. And if you wish, and this is really, really powerful in the case of, different phases of an engineering project, for example, or I worked with customer years ago that built fire trucks, and they wanted to be able to track the fire truck build by phase. And so, which was really interesting and really cool. But they were able to break down a budget of hours by phase of these different fire truck builds and ensure that they were staying on track with the project. So that is a really fantastic feature. And it does feed into QBO project profitability as well as QuickBooks Desktop job costing. And really, really helps you make sure that you're keeping on track with those budgets, whether it's a budget of hours or budgeted dollars once that time goes back over to the QuickBooks side of things. Really robust schedule within QuickBooks Time, which is great for people to be able to see their schedules, clock in from a schedule. One of the features that I really like about the QuickBooks Time schedule is the tardies report, and that's what's in this red inset. It's a way that you can, if you have, for example, in this screenshot, you can see Frank Martin in the time period September of, well, I did put a pretty wide time range in there because I wanted it to look really dramatic. But you can see in the time period I selected, Frank was 13 times tardy. He was tardy more than 5 minutes, 13 times. And you can set your threshold of tolerance, whether it's 0 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. With this, I can go to Frank and I can say, look, Frank, we have an attendance issue. I need you to be on time more. And to Sean's point earlier, this is another area where it takes it out of the realm of opinion and emotion and drops it, just straight in the world of facts, right? You were scheduled.
Really good thing that this wasn't available during my senior year in high school.
Oh
really
my goodness, seriously.
I would put Frank to shame, actually.
But it is a great way if you have to have a difficult conversation with an employee, you can say, hey, look, this was your schedule. This is when you clocked in. Like, this isn't just your coworkers irritated with you and telling stories. No, this is legit. Frank, you need to come to work on time or we're going to have a big problem. I also have a little screenshot here of the payroll report within QuickBooks Time, which shows you in the moment. You can run this anytime during a pay cycle, 24/7, you can run these reports. And with this, you can see how many hours have your employees tracked that are regular versus overtime, double time, paid time off. So long before payroll hits, how much overtime you're looking at. Overtime and double time, if you're in a state like California, can kill a payroll budget. But you have the reporting here to be able to see, how are we doing on that? Do I have somebody that's racking up the overtime? Maybe I need to pull them off the clock, reallocate those resources, and protect my payroll budget a little bit. So some really great reporting to be able to keep things on track, control budgets, help your business grow, and be more profitable.
We have a couple union shops on the blue collar side where it's not just about whether or not they're in line for the payroll on the job where job costs are concerned, but it's also about calculating union dues properly, or if it's not union, perhaps what do they call that when you I forget the name of it, but when it's
This is a certified payroll.
Right?
Yep.
There you are. And that I've seen, our customers tell us that they get in a lot less conflicts with the with the unions for the payments that they're making, because it's really very clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it's electronic time tracking versus paper, there's a lot less wiggle room for interpretation, and it reduces, like you said, that strife, because it's just based more in fact than opinion. Really deep integration with QuickBooks. Obviously, T-Sheets was acquired by QuickBooks, is now called QuickBooks Time. Really deep integration with both online and desktop, where you can do your billable hours invoicing with just a click of a button. That, to me, when I used to do demos, loved to show the invoicing and how quick it was to do invoicing. No more manual entry of those hours. It was beautiful. Gets you the data for your job costing really easily. And payroll item mapping is something that I always found really exciting. Again, it's one of those hidden treasures within QuickBooks Time, where you can take your payroll items, if you're using QBO payroll, and you can actually map them to particular tasks or service items. So if you have an instance where your employees get paid a certain rate, maybe they get paid minimum wage for their drive time to a job site, but then they get paid a different wage when they're on that job site, or perhaps depending on what type of work they're doing at the site. With payroll item mapping, you can actually make it so that when they select certain items on their time cards, that it will trigger the correct payroll item when that time goes back to QuickBooks Payroll, whether it's QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop. That, from a payroll running perspective, is such a time savings, where you can take payroll from hours every pay period down to 30 minutes, because so much of it is automated, which is fantastic. One last story I'll share, from another customer that I spoke with years ago, the woman that did payroll for a small business. And she said that once they implemented T-Sheets, she stopped dreading the payroll day, the day that she had to run payroll, because it used to be that she could never get home on time for dinner on days that she ran payroll, because she was tracking down timesheets and she was having to decipher everything. And it was just such a nightmare for her. And she never got home for dinner on time with her family on the days that she ran payroll. Then they implemented T-Sheets, and which again is now QuickBooks Time. And it dropped her payroll time down so much. She's like, I now get home for dinner on time with my family. And I have never forgotten that story, because to me, that's why I do what I do. Now I'm working with partners instead of directly with customers, but it's still my why behind doing what I do. So figure out what's important to you. What are your business needs? How much time savings do you need? How much automation do you want? What do you need to integrate with other business systems, whether that's your payroll, your accounting, your proprietary software, whatever it is, what do you need to integrate with? And then find the best solution for your business based on those needs. All right. I'm sorry I have run us over time. There's so much to talk about when it comes to time. But are there any questions that I can answer?